Hi everyone. Today I want to show you how to make gluten-free pastry. Last week I showed you how to make my absolutely amazing apple pie with the spelt short crust pastry, and I thought it was only fair that I show how to make gluten-free pastry for those who cannot do gluten. So the key to making pastry, of course, is flour, and pastry requires soft flour, or what they call cake and pastry flour. And unfortunately, rice flour, which is typically used in most gluten-free products, is not soft flour. It's very hard. So what I like to do is mix flours. So I have three flours here. I have the white rice flour, which you can see here, and it's quite hard. You can't clump it together at all. That's how hard it is. Okay, so that's one type of flour. I have the garbanzo and fava bean flour. It's nice and soft, so I can easily clump this with my hands. So that tells you that it's soft flour. And then I have what is my absolute favorite flour to work with gluten-free. It's whole bean flour, and it's really hard to get, but it's a kind of cross between, you can see it's soft, I can clump it together, but it's not quite as soft as the garbanzo and fava flour. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to make it with the white rice flour and the garbanzo and fava bean flour. Now, I have made this with brown rice flour many times, so you can do that as well. And if it's still not to your liking, or maybe you can't find the garbanzo bean and fava bean flour, what you can also use is you can mix some tapioca starch in with the white rice flour or the brown rice flour, and that will make it a little softer. But it really does work best if you can use these two flours or the white rice flour and the whole bean. So I'm showing you the packages here because most places you can get Bob's Red Mill, so you can see that they have a white rice flour, they also have a brown rice flour, and they also have the garbanzo and fava bean flour. You can also get straight garbanzo bean, which is of course chickpeas. You can also get straight fava flour. You can use either one of those. And if you go to either Persian stores or Indian stores, you can get what's known as gram flour or besan flour, which is like a yellow lentil flour, and it works really well as these do. Now, the only issue with bean flours is that they do smell beany, and as long as the bean flour is not old, the beaniness cooks right out and you don't taste it at all. However, at a certain point, they do age and the beaniness is there forever, and it can get quite stinky. So what I suggest you do is, if you're not going to use this all up fairly quickly, I would put it in the freezer. Okay, so those are the flours we're going to use, so we can get started. So here are all the ingredients for the pastry. We are going to use 1 cup of white rice flour. We're using 2/3 of a cup of garbanzo and fava bean flour. We're going to use 1.5 teaspoons of organic sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 tablespoons milk, and if you want to use coconut milk, use light coconut milk, not full fat, because that's the closest one to the whole milk that I'm using. We are going to use 1 egg. We're going to use 2 to 3 teaspoons of coconut oil and 1/2 cup of butter. And again, if you are not going to be using butter, then you can use all coconut milk. So it would be 1/2 cup of coconut oil and 2 to 3 teaspoons more on top of that. Now, I would chill the coconut oil that you're going to be using to replace butter if you're going to replace the butter. And you could also use ghee if you like. That would work really well, but it has to be chilled. But this coconut oil, this 2 to 3 teaspoons, it needs to stay room temperature. So these are all our ingredients, and so now we're going to put this all together. So as you can see, I am using a mixer to make this instead of a food processor. And so this is very simple. You're just going to add your flour, get all of it in there, and put the other flour in. I'm going to add the 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. and the teaspoon and a half of sugar. We're going to throw in the butter, and I have, as you can see, cut it into cubes. And we're throwing in the coconut oil. Now the nice thing about this pastry is that you can make the whole thing in the mixer. You do not have to mix it and then take it out and then add the wet ingredients. So we're putting everything that is dry in, plus the fat, and then we're going to add the egg and the milk when this butter has been incorporated into the flour. Now, if you don't have a mixer like this, any mixer will do. So whatever mixer you have, you're basically trying to break the butter up so that it, is mixed into little tiny pieces with the flour. And so any mixer will do. If you don't have a mixer, you could use the food processor, but you're not going to make it all in the food processor. You're going to do this stage first, transfer it to a bowl, and then add your liquid. But if you have a mixer like this or a regular mixer, you can do this all in one bowl. All right, so we're going to turn this on now. So what you're trying to do, and I know you can't really see this, I'm going to try and move the camera so you can see it. There we go. You can make it a little faster if you like. And you just have this mixed like this until the butter pieces are teeny tiny. Okay. So, sorry, just let me get this here. You can see the size. It's not quite as small a piece as you would do with regular pastry, but the butter is soft, so that means it will finish mixing when you add the liquids. So now all we have to do is add the milk and add the egg. See, I didn't even beat it. Now, if you want a replacement for the egg, you could use 2 teaspoons of ground chia. So you grind the chia, then measure out 2 teaspoons plus 2 tablespoons water. Or you could use egg replacer powder, which would be 1 teaspoon of the powder with 2 tablespoons of water. Either one works very nicely. All right, so now we just have to mix this till it mixes together. Okay, so you can see that the dough came together nicely. So we're just going to take the blade out and we're going to put this on our counter. This way. Get all the dough off. And then you just sort of finish putting it together in a ball. And now we're going to let this rest for about 30 minutes in the refrigerator. You can put this in a bowl and just put a lid over the bowl, like a plate over the bowl, or you can put it in saran wrap and just leave it to sit for about 30 minutes. Now, if it's still quite cold, you could roll it right away, but you need to be, fairly confident about your rolling skills before I would roll it without letting it sit for a few minutes. Okay, so our pastry is ready to roll, and we're going to make a single crust because we are making a banana cream pie. So we don't need all of this. This amount will usually make a double crust pie. So we're just going to put the extra aside. And I have white rice flour here that I'm going to use to dust the counter. So hard flour, which the white rice flour is, actually makes a better flour for dusting because it's less sticky. So it will help prevent things from sticking to the pastry and from sticking to the counter. And so what you want to do is you want to start rolling your pastry, gently lifting it as you go so that you know it's not sticking. And if it starts to stick, then you're just going to put a little bit more underneath. If it sticks on top, you'll just put a little bit more on top. And you just keep rolling until you have a piece of pastry rolled out that's a little wider than the circumference of the pie plate you'll be using. You just keep moving it around, making sure it's not sticking. You want to get it to be about, oh, maybe not even 1/8 of an inch thick, but around there. It's hard to see on the camera how thick that is, but it's not very thick at all. And then once you have that, you're sure that you've got what you like, then you can put your pie plate on here. And what you want to have is extra hanging over, and it depends how you rolled this. So you want to have, well, maybe 1 inch to 2 inches. And it doesn't have to be perfect because you can repair this. You can stick dough where you'd like it to be. I'm just going to take off from where the handles were because I don't need that. And now I can fold this in half and I can put it into my pie plate. And now I can make the lip or the crust that's going to sit on top. Okay, so essentially what you want to do is you want to have about double the thickness of the original pastry, and you're going to form a lip to it. You're just going to sort of fold it over. And you can, if you find one spot is thicker, you can sort of squish it and make it all about the same thickness. Okay, so you're just going around and making this lip. And if you have a little extra, you take it off. Okay, so you just have a nice lip going around like that. And now what you're going to do is pinch it. So the way I pinch is I put my finger here and I twist. I can do it either way. So I can do it this way where I'm trying to do it so you can see my hands aren't in the way. So you stick your finger there and you twist. I'm just twisting like this. But I'm using my finger so that I have something for it to brace against. And you just go all the way around until you have a nice finish to your pie crust. Make sure it's all nice and smooth, no cracks. Tighten that up a bit. Okay, so this is ready to bake. And because we're making a banana cream pie, we have to do what's known as blind baking it, which means we're going to cook the shell ahead of time. So to do this, you put it in the oven at 400 degrees and you bake it for about 20 minutes. However, because this has fat in it, and a considerable amount, the sides will melt and the pie will sink in if you don't do something to prevent that. So there's 2 ways you can do this. You can take a piece of parchment like this, and then you can fill the cavity with something. So I'm just using brown rice. You can use dried brown rice, white rice, dried legumes. You can use There's something called clay beads that you can buy from Amazon, and this is what they're for. It's to hold this in place, and you can reuse them over and over again. And what you want to do is make sure everything is up against the sides, because that's what you're trying to prevent from happening, is the sides sinking in. So don't worry so much about the bottom. Push the rice or the beans or whatever you're using up against the sides. Now, with this method, you bake it for 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes, you pull this out, because what you will see is the sides are cooked, but the bottom is raw. I don't like this method. I find that the bottom never does cook, either get too much dark up here, or this doesn't cook properly. So I have another method where you use a piece of parchment paper like this, and then you stick something in it, like a cake pan, that's about the right diameter. So this is a 9-inch pie plate, but the actual circle on the bottom is about 7 inches. This is a 7-inch in diameter cake pan. And what I like about this is it cooks the bottom at the same time, and the pressure of the parchment paper, because of the cake pan being in here, pulls up the sides, and you get a very nice, evenly baked shell. So you have options there. It doesn't have to be a cake pan. It could be something made of glass as well. As long as it's something suitable to go into the oven and it's strong, you will have what you need. And this is a great way to blind bake. So we're just going to put this into the oven now, and we will pull it out when it is done. And again, that's 400 degrees for about 20 minutes. So here we are at the 15-minute mark, and I just wanted to show this to you. If you remove the pan and the paper, you can see that it is cooking nicely. It needs about 5 minutes more. So a lot of times, now that this is cooked, I will put it back in the oven like this, just to make sure it gets more uniform all around. Okay, so this is now baked, and you can see it has cooked even on the bottom. Don't pay any mind to those little cracks, because it doesn't really matter. That's going to be filled in with some custard. And if you're wondering what this darker rim, that's because when I put the pie plate in, or sorry, the cake pan in, I pressed it down like that. So if you press it, you'll get a mark like that, but if you just rest it in there, you're less likely to get that mark. But that's not a big deal. It's just some extra color. Okay, so now we're ready to make the filling for the banana cream pie. Okay, so we're going to make our filling now, and what I have here is 1.5 cups of whole milk. You could use light coconut milk. I have 1/4 cup of whole milk, so this is for a different stage. I have 1 egg. I have 4 teaspoons of butter. I have 2/3 of a cup of organic sugar. I have some vanilla. I'm going to use 1/4 teaspoon. I have 2 tablespoons of tapioca flour or tapioca starch. Either name works for this. It's the same product. And 1 tablespoon of white rice flour. And then, of course, I have 2 bananas. And as you can see, they're in different stages of ripeness. This one's a little too green, and this one's a little overripe. It's actually really good from a flavor perspective. This is a perfect stage. This is usually the stage I use for my banana cream pie, but probably because of the way this looks here, it might have a little bruising here, so it might not be as ideal as I would like. You pick the banana level that you like for your particular taste. I do find that the riper it is, the little sweeter it is, so that's really nice. And I also have about 1/3 cup of coconut here. This is sulfite-free, unsweetened coconut, and I'm going to add that because I just love coconut banana cream pie. If you wanted to make straight coconut cream pie, you would just, add more coconut. And if you want straight banana, you just use the bananas, but I really like the combination. And if you were doing coconut milk, and you would also use coconut oil instead of the butter, you would also want to add the coconut for even more coconut flavor. So those are your options, and this is really quite easy to do. And I'm going to show you a method that prevents you having to stand there and stir and stir and stir until it boils. If you have any experience with making custard or pastry cream, you know that if you don't stir it while it's coming up to a boil, you end up having it burnt on the bottom. But this is a much faster way, and it's easier. So we're going to start with putting the heat on, and we're going to put it on high heat. And the first thing we're going to do is add the 1.5 cups of milk. And we're going to add our sugar. And we're going to add the butter. And then we're just going to give this a little stir so the sugar is dispersed. And then, while we're waiting for it to boil, we're going to put the other ingredients together. Now, I'm using tapioca flour or starch, whatever you want to call it, and white rice flour because I find that tapioca starch, when it thickens, it's a little, I don't know how to describe it, it's a little stringy in nature. If this was cornstarch, it would be perfect. I would use 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, but it's really hard to find non-GMO cornstarch. So I'm mixing the 2 of these because I think the white rice flour will help it be a little less stringy and it'll make a better custard. I've also used brown rice flour, so if you want to use that, you can use that too. All right, so I'm just going to put these 2 together and give them a little bit of a stir. And then I'm going to add them to this milk. And then I'm just going to take my whisk here and mix it all in. You want to make sure there's no lumps. And then we're going to add the egg. Okay, so the way this works is there's nothing in here right now that will stick and burn. The sugar won't, the butter won't, the milk won't. So unless you leave it on so long that it completely evaporates out and you know, don't have anything in the pot. But this won't burn the way it is now. All the sticky stuff, the egg and the flours, are in here. And so what we're doing is we're bringing this to a boil, and you can see it's starting to boil now. And all we have to do is add this in, give it a quick stir, let it boil, and the custard is done. So you can see it's boiling. So now I'm going to add this, stirring as I go. And now I just have to stir it for a very short time. You can see how it's starting to bubble and thicken up. And our beautiful custard is done. Okay, so then we stop this. And you want to see nice big thick bubbles like that because that means it's going to set. It won't be runny. And now we're going to add our vanilla because you always add the vanilla after you take it off the heat because sometimes it can go bitter if it's exposed to too high heat. So I'm putting in about half a teaspoon. And I'm going to give that a stir. I'm going to add my coconut. And now we're ready to put it in the pie crust. So we'll just get all this out of the way because it just makes our lives easier. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to put a little bit in the bottom. Because your goal is here that you're going to cover all of the bananas. So you want to make sure there aren't some air spaces on the bottom because then the bananas will turn brown. Get that all in there. And now we can add our banana. So I'm going to start with the yucky one to see how yucky it is. And as I suspected, there are some bruises here. You can just take them off if you like. There we go. And we are going to put that in. Whoops. Take that part off too. All right, we're just going to put this in. And because we had to take off some of the banana, we'll put in some of the green banana too. And you have to work fairly quickly when you do this because the custard is setting. So now you want to move the bananas around and make sure you have some so that they get some banana with every piece of pie that they eat. All right. There we go, lots of bananas. And now we can put the rest of the custard in. And we just move it around so that it covers everything. Make sure all the bananas are covered. And there you have it. There is our banana coconut cream pie, or our coconut banana cream pie, whichever way you want to say it. And we just let this set now. You always serve this at room temperature. And when it's done, you want to serve it with either whipping cream or ice cream. You can also use coconut ice cream, of course, whatever ice cream you like. And it's absolutely delicious.